All right, students, I've done the finish pattern on the pin piece that I'm going to do. So now I'm getting ready to sand. Now as I go to sand, I want to get my tool rest out of the way. So notice I'll pull it just right over here and station it just right out of the way. As I sand, I'm going to go get my sandpaper box. And the sandpaper box looks a lot like this. It's got the strips of red sandpaper, that's the ones we use on the lathe, and it's got the different grit sizes, and if you just follow what it says, it'll work out just great. Which is, I want to start with the 150 grit, then go to the 240, then the 320, and then the 400. And just like we taught you when we talked about grit and sandpaper in class on our last project, realize I'm going to do the most work with the 150. That's where I'm going to get the last of my shaping in and everything else like that. And then all I'm doing after that is changing my 150 scratches to my 240, then to my 320, and then to my 400 on the progression that way. So in the box, I got the sandpaper. Look on the back. It's either written or printed on what we're looking at. So I got my 150. Come in here and I'm going to do it. Now the biggest thing with sanding is we want to do it at a low RPM. We want to go back to around the 1000 RPM that we were at before. And that 1000 RPM is going to just slow us down considerably. It allows it to sand and not just blow the grit off the paper. So the higher speeds are going to blow it off. I'm going to come in here and do lots of different strategies and move my paper around, but I notice there's a little bit of friction and I feel a little bit of heat, and as that heat builds up, that tells me I need to move it around on the paper. I don't really want it to build up the heat. I want to be careful to sand mostly the wood and not so much my bushings, because I want to keep those the size that they're at. So as I see little tool marks, I'm going to like curl the paper, do what I need to get it into this space and rub it around while letting it spin and getting it down. So I got a little tool mark right here, so I'm going to spend a little bit extra time there. I want to blend this down right to my bushing, so sand just a little bit more there. Clean up some of that little bit of a tool marks right there that's left and come on to my other side. And I'll do the same thing. Sometimes I'll roll it, whatever it takes to get it to the shape I need to sand in the pieces that I have going. Okay, come over here, blend that in a little bit better. Clean that up going all the way across. Now I'll take a look at it. Any sharp lines or edges like this one right here from the tool, I'm going to want to come in and clean up. The scratches that go around it that are just the 150 scratches, those will be able to come out pretty easily. Looks like I got two little spots to clean up. I got one right here and one right here. Quickly clean those up. And now I'm ready to go on to the next grit. So just like the box says, after my 150, I go to my 240. So I get my 240 sandpaper. Sometimes it gets totally caked and worn out. We'll need to find some or get some more from Mr. Tobler, but there's usually a pretty good supply in the box. So, same speed, about 1000 RPM. Here, I don't need to spin the time. Whoa! I don't need to spin the time taking it down. I'm just looking to get my 150 scratches out. So I always want to make sure I go into all those same places, blend it in. On this walnut, it'll actually clean it up quite easily. And it's not going to take too much time. About a minute and a half. Not very much time to go over everything. And blend in those 150 scratches, now making them down to 240 scratches. Now, 240 is a lot. And when we've done our other projects, we go down to 220 and we call it good. But when you're having something in your hand and it's turned, we can make it super smooth by keep sanding a little further. So now we go down 240 to my 320. Same thing. I don't want to skip grits because that'll just cause me a lot of work, go through a lot more sandpaper and cause me more time from there. Take those 240 scratches and now we're going to turn them into 320 scratches, which is pretty fine. A lot of polished metals like they have on guns and other things are done with the 320 sandpaper, and then that's as far as they go. Feel across there, feel, and it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go on to my 400 grit. Now this is my last one. This one, here again, very fine. It's going to clog up the paper pretty quickly if we don't move it around and on some oily wood, so I'm going to move it around quite a bit. I got quite a bit of friction going, and then let it do its sanding as I go, just making sure I get everything all the way through my profiles that I have, all the way to my ends. And I hope you could see how super smooth it looks and feels. Now it looks like I got a little bit of weird scratches right there, so I'm going to come back and blend that in just a little bit more. And bingo, that looks good. So if this was the last thing I was going to do and I wasn't going to do any wire burning, then I'm going to take it at this point and I'm going to just stop it and turn it and go with the grain. So this is going to hide those teeny tiny 400 grit scratches, and it's going to hide it with the grain, because right now they're kind of in a little bit of a circular pattern. And so without the lathe turned on, I'm just turning it by hand. I'm just taking it down, blending in those little scratches to hide them a little bit better with the grain. Okay, so at this point I'm ready to put on finish, or I'm ready to do the wire burning. And I think I'm going to do the wire burning next. All right, students. Now, as we come to this section, we're going to talk about wire burning. And as we do some wire burning, it's usually a detail that you can add to the pin to give it an element that looks just a little different. Now, I think it's a detail that looks good with just a few wire burns on here, and not like putting like 20 of them across, because then it kind of gets lost. You kind of lose the grain in that process. So for this pin, I'm going to plan a few wire burns to kind of come in here and to take place. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn it on after sanding, bring my pencil in here, and I'm going to mark where I want it to wire burn. So I think I want to have a wire burn right there. I think that'll look good. In fact, let's see here. Let's put a wire burn here, put a wire burn here, and a wire burn right on that bead. We'll do it kind of that way. So I like to mark with my pencil and adjust where I think it's going to look good. Wire burner tends to get a little bit fatter than my pencil line all the way across there. So I'm hoping on the camera you can see those pencil lines pretty well. Now, I need to come in and I need to take a sharp point that is either on a skew or this parting tool, and I want to very gently go in less than a 1/16 and cut. And you notice I'm just coming up here from the bottom, gently bringing it up, and I'm just barely going to cut myself a little tiny groove for my wire burner to sit in on. There we go. So I've got this teeny tiny groove right where I had the pencil marks. So now I'll come in and I will go ahead and do the burning. Now the wire burner is a tool that looks a lot like this. It's got two handles and basically a piano wire, and it's going to use friction to burn into the wood. Here again, I need to be bigger than my brass in here, because if I'm really close, as I burn in, it's going to burn right to the brass. You're going to see that brass. Sometimes the wood's going to flake and fall off, and that's not so good. So I don't necessarily want to go deep, but I want to burn it, and that's going to take some speed. So I'm going to leave my tool rest here, turn on the lathe, and I'm going to crank it way up. 3,000 or more RPM is not too much. So then I'm going to lay it across here right on the tool rest and right around it, and the intent is, that one moved around on me, the intent is I want it to smoke, I want it to burn. I want to push in a little bit, but I mostly want to get that cleaned up or nice and burned, and oh, it's got a delicious smell on this walnut as it burns in. So it is going to smoke a little. Whoa, should have made my grooves just a little bit bigger, but the idea is I want it to burn, so I'm going to wrap that wire around going really fast, get that burning to happen in these places. Notice I'm going on different parts of my wire so it doesn't heat through and burn through the wire, keeping it cool by going to some different parts that way. So that burning happens pretty quick. A lot of it's getting it set up on where I want it to go. I did have some little sections where I went a little bit off. So I'm going to crank it back down to about my 1,000 RPM. I'm going to go back and do my sanding in those little tiny sections again. So I don't want it to take too long. So I find some 240. pull this out of the way, find some 240, clean up that little part, clean up that little part where it kind of moved around on me, 320, come in and clean that up. Now I'm going to go back to my 400. I want to run across the whole thing. Where I burn, I get this little burnish, this little burr on the edge of the wood. I want to come and take that burnish right off, right where I wire burn. I don't want to do that with anything more aggressive than the 400 though, because I don't want to lose those edges and those pieces that I've done going across there. So, bingo. We've got it laid out, we've got it sanded. At this point, because I'm ready to do the finish next, I'll stop and run the 400 with the grain all the way across, clean that up, blending those sections in. And we're ready to do finish.